Witness as faith and surfing collide in our new series that sheds light on the captivating journey of a vast community forged through faith and waves. Welcome to the origin of a legacy, the story of Christian surfers South Africa. From the rugged coastline of Cape Town to the sandy shores of Durban, a vision had been established and a legacy was born. Each episode invites you into the history and footsteps of those who forged the path of Christian surfers in South Africa. Fueled with a love for Jesus and sharing his good news with all through the medium of surf culture, join us as we dive into the testimonies that make up the origin of Christian surfers South Africa. Thrill over untold stories and immerse yourself in the experiences of the individuals that charged into the challenges set before them, pioneering the foundation of the community you and I have the privilege to be a part of.
Hi, my name is Richard Ellerington, and today I have the privilege of being with Roy Harley as together we explore the foundations of Christian surfers South Africa. I'm with an absolute legend, and it's going to be an exciting few minutes as we delve deep into the story that surrounds the chaos of Roy Harley's life and the journey of Christian surfers in South Africa. So it's going to be good. Well then, Mr. Harley, welcome to Origins of a Legacy and welcome to the couch.
Oh, that sounds good.
The Surfboard Library.
Lovely. Some nice stuff. There's a little single fin, interesting Clint there. Yeah,
Some proper boards, mate.
some proper boards.
So we're going to delve straight in, mate, with a bunch of rapid fire questions to get to know exactly who you are.
Sweet.
So are you ready?
Yep.
Now your first response, mate, is what we need.
Okay.
So here we go. I should have had that ready before before we went it. Here we go. Give me a moment. It's rapid fire, and this is very rapid.
This seems very rapid.
Yeah. Okay then. So here we go. So super tubes or pipeline.
Super tubes.
Okay. Snowboarding for a week or surfing for a week.
I would have always said surfing, but there's something about snowboarding and being in the mountains. So, and I don't do it much, so snowboarding for a week.
Is the Harley evolving into a snowboarder?
Well, you know, Jerry Lopez spends a lot more of his time not in pipeline, but in, I
Yeah.
think, one of the mountain areas. So,
Yeah.
and there is just something about being in the mountains and how it connects you with God that's just the same as the ocean, right? But
Yeah.
it's different, yeah.
Very special. All right.
So it's all new. It's new for me, but it's an exciting new chapter.
That's the exciting thing, isn't it? When you're discovering something new.
Absolutely. So it's like being a Grom again. It's like I know I've spent so many years surfing, but snowboarding, everything's brand new.
Love it. Japan or the US?
That's a tricky one. They're both amazing places. I think Japan, because it's just so different.
North or south?
South.
Reason being?
I live south.
Okay. Okay, now surfing with one of your kids. Who's it going to be? You've got to make a choice. It's got to be one or the other. You've got to give the reason why you would choose to surf with that child and also reject the other. Oh, you're on the hot spot. So surfing with Kaylin or Nathan Harley, who would you choose?
Both, depending on the waves.
Okay.
But you see, it's simple, right? So,
Yeah.
so Kaylin and I love surfing when it's small. She takes me out to have a couple of conversations, and it's normally a longboard or mid-length, and it's way more relaxed. When it's pumping, then Nathan is all about it. It's all
Yes.
about, like, let's get up to supers, let's get up to wherever we can go. And he's constantly on about new waves that he can surf and where he can try things. And I love surfing. I absolutely love surfing with both of them. It's one of the greatest privileges of my life.
Yeah. And you've done a brilliant job of answering that beautifully to not offend either of your children. Good job, sir.
Well, it's the truth.
It's good. Okay, so Men at Work or the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Chili peppers.
Of course, hallelujah. I'm stoked on it. So South Africa to win the Rugby World Cup or Geordie Smith to win a world title?
Love you, Geordie, but I'm going to go for the South African World Cup again.
Really? Yeah. Beat England again, huh? So are you...
Or maybe New Zealand or
1 point,
Ireland
1
or-
point. Is it Instagram or X for you?
I use both, but Instagram probably a lot more.
Okay. So are you Speedos or a Y-front man?
None of the above.
Really? Okay.
No, just regular old boxes.
Regular old boxes, that's good. So are you guitar or bass?
Guitar. I'd love to play bass, but guitar's my home.
Guitar is good. And you used to play proper guitar, eh?
I wouldn't say proper.
Yeah.
I used to play guitar.
You used to play guitar.
Well, I used to play the fool that was
Yes.
holding a guitar.
Okay. And I'm sure you did it well. We'll
Oh,
get
I
into
did the
it.
fool excellently.
I want to get into that later. All right, now, would you prefer to sing or to preach? Because I hear that you can sing as well.
No, maybe I think I can sing.
Okay.
I haven't sang or been part of the front side of anything for ages. I don't ever think I was very good at it. But preaching is fun if it lands right. Yeah. So
Quicksilver or Billabong?
Billabong.
Okay, I wonder why. Why Billabong?
I don't know. Quicksilver. Well, to be absolutely honest, I think we have the brands are sold out and been taken. What we understand as Quicksilver, Billabong, from back in the 80s and 90s doesn't exist anymore. And actually, I think there's a whole new birth of the surf brands. So things, Whistler was probably one of the first ones, but Need Essentials. There's so many really cool Mama Wata. There's so many really cool things out there that are much more core. So, to be honest, I probably wouldn't go for either of them.
Well, I would if I was having to choose, I'd choose Billabong simply because of Oki.
Oki, Andy, somehow for me,
Andy,
Billabong, in terms of surfing and surfers, just have this sort of more core kind of thing.
I agree. Okay, shortboard or a fish?
Fish. Well, no. So shortboard or a twin fin. There's a difference.
Okay.
And a fish is not a twin fin.
Yes.
It's a version of a twin fin.
But my question was shortboard or fish?
Twin fin.
Okay. Classic. Fish or chips?
Fish and chips are awesome.
Yeah, fish or chips. You've got to choose one or the other.
Fish.
You would choose fish. Bunny chow, which is South African.
I know what a bunny chow is.
Weird
mate.
food. I know you do, but just for the audience if they don't
I grew
know.
up in Durban.
So what is a bunny chow?
It's the most beautiful thing. So it's like cuisine of the highest level that's really cheap. Basically, it's a fresh half loaf of bread with the insides dug out and the most insanely authentic mutton Indian curry inside of it. Wow. You cannot beat it.
That sounds awesome. So do you want a bunny chow or do you want some Bitcoin?
I'll take Bitcoin.
Yes.
Because I can buy bunny chow then.
Yeah, absolutely. Not with your Bitcoin, though.
Well, who knows where Bitcoin's going? Maybe bunny chow is a better investment.
It may well be a better investment. Definitely more immediate results.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you had to take out a celebrity to a pumping, crazy surf break where potentially you could die, would you choose to take out Trump or Ramaphosa?
That is can I take the fifth on that one?
You can take the fifth. All right, that's great. You completed the rapid fire questions. Well done, mate. That was excellent. Excellent work. So, Mr. Harley, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? And give us the geography of where you are from.
Well, I'm from South Africa. My parents are from South Africa, my grandparents are from South Africa, and my great-grandparents are from South Africa. So where I grew up, I actually grew up in Johannesburg, nowhere near the ocean. My dad got a job down in Durban when I was about 9, 10. And so we lived 35, 40 minutes from the beach. So the beach was something I went to, but surfing was just not part of my life. Didn't really do well at school. Myself in school were kind of like oil and water in some ways. And I think a friend of mine actually said, hey, let's go hang out at the beach. We were about 13, 14. And he actually said to me, Roy, there's more girls at the beach. So we went and hung out at the beach. First day was howling onshore, brown water, nothing. There was no one on the beach. It was just the two of us. I'd borrowed a board from the back of some guy's garage that had been left in the sun, so the deck was all wobbly. Paddled out. I caught some little whitewater, somehow managed to get to my feet and probably went 3 to 4 meters. And I was like, I think I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Immediate, huh?
It was absolutely immediate, and I think every single Saturday from then on, pretty much we spent at the beach. Like, it was just the thing we did. He spent a little bit more time on the beach.
Chasing the girls.
Yeah, he was pretty good at that.
Yeah.
I just lived in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what age was that? That was it?
14.
14. So you've been surfing for how long now?
40 years.
40 years of surfing.
Yeah.
And you just won the Bullies J-Bay Board Riders and Grand Bullies. You smashed me and a whole bunch of other local
But you're not a
surfers.
grand buddy there.
No, I sneaked in somehow under the radar. But you smashed everybody in the final.
I had a good heat.
You had two
I
great
had
heats,
two
mate.
great heats. Yeah,
Two
it was
great
really fun.
heats.
I mean, I think the heats are like, flip of a coin. And I have surfed competitively. I got into competitive surfing when I was in my sort of 20s, when Christian Surfers was starting. And I just had a good heat. Was able to. The first one started off well. The second one started badly, but I was able to build it. And in all honesty, I'm pretty sure it was the last wave that did it. I just was in the right place, right time.
Yes, you were.
Priority. Back in the day, you had to hustle like crazy
Yeah,
and play
yeah.
all sorts of tricks. It was.
So that's been 40 odd years of surfing. That's a long journey. Have there been moments in your in this dedication and passion to surfing where you've just thought, I'm over it, I want to do something else? Has it always been there as like the driving force of who you are, your character, your nature? Roy Harley, he's a surfer.
I think you got to surfing, because I've done it for my whole life, is you've got to understand how it flows through your life. And so I think what's important is that for me, when I started surfing, not only did I find a sport or something that I really enjoyed doing, but I found a tribe, a community of people. And I kind of found my tribe. Like, it was hard to explain. Like, I didn't really fit in the other spaces in school and those kind of things. And yet there was massive grammar abuse being put upside down in dustbins and all that kind of stuff. Yet there was this acceptance that I was this underling in this surfing crew that surfed out there. And I just liked the lifestyle. It was easy. It was, easygoing. It felt really authentic. It was not pretentious. People weren't worried about what you looked like, who you were friends with. And it just felt so refreshing. And so I think, for me, if you fast forward till when I was 16, by this stage, I'm cutting school. I'm doing whatever I can to get down to the beach. Remember a fun day when I'm like hitchhiking in my board shorts and this car comes past. I'm like, oh, I recognize that car. It's my dad.
Oh, no.
And he, anyway, there was a...
Are you cutting school?
I was cutting school, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept all my sick notes from that without handing them in, and then I'd cut the dates off, and then every time there's a good surf, I just rewrite a new date on the top, and I'd be sick for that day.
Love it.
Anyway, so surfing. There was a big argument with me and my mom, and my mom turned to me and she said, "Roy, surfing is your god." And I remember thinking, no, it's not, but it was. And at the same time, I was discovering faith, or making my faith my own. But so if you fast forward that story a little bit, it doesn't take long before I am really wrestling with this. I've made a commitment to follow Jesus. It's been the most significant thing in my life. And when it happened, it was not near the ocean. Okay. And I went to a camp because there was a girl going on this camp, and she'd asked me. And I actually remember struggling with the fact that this camp was for 5 days, and it meant that I would not surf for 5 days. It was like a massive deal in my life. But at the camp, nothing really happened with the girl. Amazing girl, still friends. But there was an encounter with Jesus that was just mind-bending. I don't know how to explain it. It's the same as finding surfing. It's something that found me. And I remember saying, well, I've got nothing to offer. I'm not doing well at school. I'm this... And you got to remember, surfing wasn't like a cool thing back then. Eh? You didn't come home to your mom and dad and go, "Hey, I'm going to join this. I'm going to go surfing," and they went, "Ooh, that's fantastic news! Oh, there's going to be great career opportunities on the other end of that." Yeah. It was more like, "Oh no! Like, what are you going to be doing? You're jumping out of the mainstream. You're going to be these are the so-called beach bum vibes. Drugs, the whole deal." And the guy said something so simple. He was like, God's everything. He created everything. He demands everything from you. And that's the construct. You become part of His family, but it's all in. There's no, and in surfing, it's all in. There's no, you can't half paddle into a wave. You won't catch it, you know. And so it kind of appealed to my personality. But at the same time, there was just something internally that I was wrestling with, this whole thing. You know, is this like a con? Is it fake? And the second night, same thing. But I just remember saying, I have nothing to offer you, God. Like, I really have nothing to give you. Like, I don't have anything that would be of value to you. But if you want my life, you can have it. And that moment, more than anything else, has set my life on its current trajectory. So whether surfing would or wouldn't be part of that, I didn't know. And then in that space, Jesus is way too big to be a satellite in our world.
Yeah.
So we try and fit Jesus or Christianity into a space where it can just kind of work in the left-hand corner, and as long as I can run my life the way I want and have it there, that's fine. But Jesus is way too big to be a satellite in our world, and therefore our gravity has to orbit around him.
So with that in mind, so Jesus has become the center place of your life.
No, he hasn't. So I'm at war because I don't want to let go of surfing, but I can't fit surfing into, I can't fit a life of surfing as it's not working. And in the very gentlest way that only that Jesus can do, he's constantly just saying, but there's this thing. So there's this beautiful story about the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus. And I mean, everyone hears that passage and goes, oh, it's about wealth, but it's not about wealth. The challenge for that young guy is that he had something that was more important to him. That was his security, that was his source, it was everything. That was his center of gravity, and that was his money. For me, that was my surfing, my identity, who I was, my friends, my tribe was surfing, and I didn't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And that battle was 3 years. And long story, a lot of other stuff happened in between. But in a very deep, hectic moment, I felt God call me to go and do some mission work, which I did, signed up for. I felt him telling me to sell my board, sell my wetsuits, give up surfing.
Whoa, that's full on.
So, and I wrestled with that for a good year. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. And the couple of weeks after I've done that, I get a phone call from a pastor, lives down at on the Bluff in Durban, one of my favorite places to surf. And he's offering me a job, a salary, a car, and he wants me to surf all day and share Jesus with surfers and, you know, get them to come to his church youth. And I'm suddenly going, well, like, but I've just laid this thing down and I've just committed to go and do something completely different. And he says to me, well, this is not God. You know, people have spoke stuff into your head. This is wrong. And I remember saying to him, even if I'm wrong, in my heart, I know that this is what I've been asked to do. Therefore, I have to do this. And so I turn that down and I go to what I can only explain as the worst, darkest, deepest valley of my life. I go and work in mission. I arrive into northeastern Transvaal. The guy who I was working with, his right-hand man has been decommissioned. Something happened, and so he's under the pump. He's got too much work to do. So he basically pitches a 500-seater tent in the middle of the bush, like nowhere near running water, electricity, and everything. He leaves me and another guy, amazing young guy, African guy named Paul, and he goes, hey, you guys run this thing, preach the gospel, heal the sick, cast out demons. I'll see you in about 10 days. And that's it. And it is wild. It is insane. And I have nothing of value to add. I realize I'm such a round peg in a square hole that Paul he understands the culture, he understands the language. And so in probably one of the most depressed, deepest, most sort of, and I'm now questioning my faith, like where's God? Like I've done everything for him and he's just abandoned me. And literally one night I grab, not a bunny chow, but a half loaf of bread, some jam, and I say to Paul, it's you, I'm out. And I hike up this mountain with a blanket, make a fire, sleep under the African stars, no electricity anyway, so I'm just fast, you know, and I'm just like, God, like, what's the deal? Like, you know, I've given you surfing, but all I can think about is surfing. And I feel like that's the moment that I actually change gravity. It's the moment that I actually let it go. And I go, you know what? I don't care. From this moment on, you're the center of gravity in my world. And you can shape me and do what you want. You can shape me how you like. And I'm going to serve you.
Wow.
You either take surfing, the desire to surf away, or you give it back to me, but I don't know. And it's insane for me how quickly things start turning around from that moment. Like within months, things are changing.
Interesting, isn't it, that how things change when you surrender something to God. and something that's such a big part of our identity as surfers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything.
Yeah.
We are surfers, but it's something which needs to be surrendered and under Christ's authority and, submitted to him. And I love that statement about Christ is too big. We have to be in his gravity as opposed to he's an add-on to our life and to the trajectory of our life. So you're in the top of a mountain, you have this moment of surrendering, surfing, going, God, I don't care anymore. I just want to chase after you. What came next? Because, we know the story that Christian surfers were birthed and you were going to play a major part in all of that. So obviously God put surfing back into your hands.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting for me now on this side, having spent my entire life surfing, is looking back and realizing the absolute significance of that event. Because I don't think that I could have done or been part of the journey that I was if that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So I probably would have carried on surfing, maybe even stopped surfing. I don't actually know if I hadn't made that decision. But making that decision realigned me. And Brett Davis, the founder of Christian Surfers, says something so profound. He says, I went from worshipping the waves that God made to worshipping the God that made the waves. And there's a massive shift in there. But at the same time, for me, what was interesting was that my faith wasn't, it took on a new life. The faith journey for me was, there was a freedom that came, and it came from one of my life verses, John 10:10. The thief comes to rob, steal, kill, and destroy. But I came that you'd have life and life to the full. And that whole passage is built on John chapter 9, which is a man born blind, who's this kid who's rejected by society. He's depressed. There's a whole lot of stuff. And I really identified with that kid. And that moment when I gave it to God, and God said, okay, well, I want you to use surfing for me. The significance of that was that decision, that change in gravity, meant that I was committing my life to orbit around him. And what I found in that space was I was welcomed into his family. What I found in that space was I became a son. I became an heir. What I found in that space was the fact that I was part of a new tribe, a kingdom, and that my goal and journey in life was to live for that kingdom. But what I also found in that space was a God that calls us to adventure, a God that calls us to do the crazy things, a God that calls us to all of the stuff that I hadn't seen in my Christian faith growing up. My Christian faith growing up was beautiful, but it was very traditional and very structured, and it didn't have much life in it. And so the birth of Christian Surfers comes out of this new revelation that actually, when God is at the center, it doesn't diminish anything. It actually emphasizes it. It's actually turning the volume up. Everything is cleaner and clearer. Wow. And so the birth of Christian Surfers and the energy of Christian Surfers is found in this search for this life to the full that Jesus has offered. And it's that search, that passion, that we're going to go for it. We're going to do stuff that's crazy and there is stuff, as in you've heard some of the stories people have heard, that is true.
Well, let's get to it. So you're coming off the top of this mountaintop experience. You're recognizing all of these things have taken place within your identity, your sense of who God is, and the priority He has in your life. And you go, now belonging to the Kingdom tribe, you're going back into your surfing tribe. And what is it that you see, and how is it that you respond to it? So this is how and why did Christian Surfers South Africa get birthed?
I think the fact is that at the end of my decision to let go of surfing, there was a real sense of peace. And there was lots of pain in that moment. I mean, there's a letter that was written to my mother by my brother saying, I do not understand why God would ask Roy to give up surfing. I've seen him surf. He's really good at it, and he enjoys it. It doesn't make sense to me. So there's a lot of pain that's in that journey. There's a real sacrifice of something that was absolutely pivotal to my life. But on the other side of that, I feel like God said, okay, well, you can have it back. He didn't say you're going to do this or start Christian Surfers or anything. He said, you can have it back, but now it's the satellite. And I think about that moment so many times, because the joy that I have and the reason that Christian Surfers came to exist was because I was still a surfer. I still belonged to that tribe. I started surfing again, started absolutely loving it, enjoying it. But at the same time, there was this burning desire that I want those folk in my tribe to know Jesus. I want them to have, if I could give my closest friends that don't surf the experience of surfing, what a joy would that be? The joy that I have when I paddle out with my kids, I didn't know if they would surf. I never pushed them, never put pressure on them. But growing up in a surfing family, they did. And the joy that I experience out there is amazing. So, but it doesn't compare to the joy and the freedom that I find in my relationship with Jesus. And what I often find is so many of my surfing tribes friends are it's jaded for them, and rightly so. They've got all these pre-constructed things that they've seen happen in Christian churches that don't reflect Jesus. And so I was like, let's pull the veneer off that. Let's take this life to the full that really... I mean, surfers are incredibly spiritual people. You can't not be if you paddle out and there's dolphins and there's sunrises and sunsets, or if you almost die by drowning regularly. So, anyway, so I think
I mean, this is back, I guess, in the 80s?
No.
90s?
90s.
90s. So this is 90s. So were there... I mean, I'm guessing surfers in those days weren't particularly welcome in churches. I guess those two worlds were kind of very separate.
Oh, completely separate. Like, Christianity and surfing were separate. To be a Christian and a surfer was like oil and water. You could be a surfer or you could be a Christian, but you could not be a Christian and a surfer. And I think that in the genesis of Christian surfers is surfers who became Christians. And that's the story I see over and over and over again. It's not Christians who went out there and decided to try and reach surfers. It was surfers who found Jesus and were like, which is such a natural part of the gospel.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Jesus is the best thing. Jesus is amazing. Like, I've got this freedom. I've got this healing. I've got this joy. How can I can't keep this to myself.
Got to share it with people.
Yeah. So basically what happened was I end up leaving the mountaintop. The mission organization I'm working with gets a letter from the South African government. I need to go to the army. So there was conscription in those days, literally without me doing anything. 6 months later, I've got no hair. My long blonde hair has been cut off. My red beard's gone. And I'm running around in the mud. And I'm going to give it this all. So I do as much as I can. I become a lieutenant. I end up getting posted nowhere near the ocean, which is why I wanted to become a lieutenant so that I could go to the ocean. And yet at the same time, I'm surfing. And there's a whole lot of stories within there. One of the most insane and most important things when you're in military service, basic training, or not basics, in your 2-year service, is pass, going home. And I get asked to speak at a camp. And I get told that I can choose to go home and see my family, who I haven't seen in months, or I can go and speak at this camp, but I can't do both. And it's this moment where I'm in front of my lieutenant and colonel, and they're saying to me, they think I'm scamming them, and they're like, you have to sacrifice your visit home. So in absolute tears, I phone my mom and I say, look, I can't come home. I need to go do this camp, and I'm going to have to sacrifice seeing you. And anyone who's been part of military service would understand the pain and the sacrifice that took. The incredible thing about that story is I go to the camp. The camp is where there's a guy who's a Christian and a surfer, and they've asked me to speak about surfing. So I speak to this group of young people, and God does some amazing stuff. I come back, by God's grace, the pass comes through and someone's made an administrative error, so I leave and go home to my family anyway.
Wow.
And there's a whole other side of my story about that's the end of the apartheid era in South Africa, and there's some real learnings that happen both in the military and then post that when I'm studying and recognizing the pain of our country, but and the unjustness of that whole era, and my awakening to politics and the impact it has on our world comes about in that space. And there's some really painful but beautiful stories in that time. But in that time, there's also a pastor whose son is a surfer, and he's now dealing with the conundrum of how can surfing and Christianity exist together, because my boy is in this world, alive in this world, and all his friends are in this world. They're all part of his school. It's in Sea Point. There's this insane set of waves, but it's gnarly. Like, there's not a single bit of sand. It's complex. There's beach. There's reef. There's no beach. There's reef breaks. There's shelves. There's ledges. It's like a really intense set of waves. And this whole little local crew that live there, that's all they surf, So they're surfing in amongst kelp. And they just have to be a high level of surfer. It's just not easy, right? And I somehow end up in a church that's working there. This pastor says to me, well, will you come and we don't want you to be part of the youth. We want you to reach surfers. and I'm actually asked to come and reach surfers.
Wow. So the church pastor asks you to go after the surfers. So that was is that the nucleus? Is that the beginning, do you think, of your journey into driving forward Christian surfers and planting it within South Africa?
Well, I really would say this and still believe it, that, one of our founder, Brett Davis from Australia, who started Christian service started in the 70s in Australia, the 80s, I think, in New Zealand and USA, UK, and the 90s in South Africa. But it was all called different things. It was called Sun Surf, S-O-N, surf, in South Africa. So the international movement of Christian surfers didn't exist. There was no such thing.
Yeah.
And Sun Surf was just what we wanted to call it. Now, how that came about was like, just before this, while this was this couple of years of almost formation that are happening, there's another pastor in a little town called East London up the coast, and this pastor he's got a whole lot of surfers, same thing, and he's looking out and he's going, well, he actually moved down from Johannesburg, was into motorbikes, and suddenly he's living in a surf town, and he's going, all these kids around here surf. There's none of them in the church. Like, how do I share Jesus with them? And so he decides to run a contest called the Sun Surf Contest, S-O-N, surf contest, right? And there's a guy at that contest who is stoned out of his tree, a friend of mine, surfer, and he goes, but he grew up in a Christian home, and he's like, what are these guys doing? This is insane. A year later, Andrew Pitt is running the contest and has heard about me, never met him, and he asks me to come to this contest. I'm just in the moment of getting back into surfing. So I'm feeling rusty. I haven't surfed now for a year and a half because I've been doing this missionary thing. I get to this contest. I'm supposed to be speaking, so I'm the guest speaker at a couple of places. And I have a heat with this guy named Craig Cuff. And Craig Cuff is a ripper, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how? This is my first surf contest since I was 16, 17. How am I going to, and anyway, myself, Craig, and Craig completely dusts me. But me, Andy, and Craig kind of get together and we're like, well, we all love Jesus and we all love surfing. So what are we going to do? So we come up with this 17-point strategic plan.
17?
No, basically, this was the strategy. Just go away and do something.
Okay.
That was it, literally.
That's
just
a better plan.
Go away and do something.
Yeah.
So I've been post the army working. I've been saving up money to go study. I want to go and study, and in that space, I'm now heading to Cape Town to go study. Craig Cuff is gone to UPE to study, and Andy is becoming a pastor, I think, in East London. And so I land in Cape Town. This church asked me to get involved. The first day I'm there, the youth pastor calls me and says, hey, we want you involved in the youth. And I say to him, no, mate, I'm not here for young people. I'm here for surfers. And there's a little bit of tension where he's like, I thought you were coming to help me. I'm like, let me be very clear. Like, I am here to study, and I'm here to reach and share Jesus with surfers. And that's all I'm interested in. I'm not interested in getting involved in anything else. So I'm going to go surfing, and I'm going to do whatever. And so that's how it kicks off. And it kicks off with a few guys. The few guys in the crew happen to be into music. And so Sun Surf, South Africa, is all about music and surfing. There's no definitive difference between them. And what's so interesting is the bands that we were all listening to is like the Chili Peppers, Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana. Nirvana, of course, was probably the root of all of it.
Yeah.
And so what we're not realizing at the time is that music is an unusual part of the South African Christian surfer story. It's not the same anywhere else in the world. For us, music and surfing go together. Yeah. And so a little band is formed called Rain. And this band is full of surfers. It's a surf band, like literally, there was not one person in the band that didn't surf. So they all have the same culture, the same vibe. We're all trying to find, our gigs are all planned around surf spots up and down the coast. And the band and Christian Surfers is running all these events. So we're starting to branch out and run more and more events. People are coming to Jesus left, right, and center. Friends that work, and one of the most significant ones, a guy named Dimitri Nikiforos, Dimitri is a surfer who's trying to figure out his faith and is not in a full place with God. Hears about Sun Surf Crew and wants to come check us out. I don't know this at the time. Checks us out thinking that we're going to be some kind of weird Christian thing, and goes, wait a minute, these guys are legit. They're like real surfers. Like they really they're part of the tribe, man. They're looking at the waves, the weather. They're charging big waves. They're surfing ledgy stuff. And we really were pushing into significant surf at the time. We were all in our 20s, so we weren't like playing around at beach breaks, you know. And so that is a catalyst for him, and he comes on board, and he's living in the same space as me, and he's studying to be a chemical engineer. There's another guy named Ian Coleman. Ian Coleman's also a student, similar deal. He goes and surfs with this older guy named Mervyn, who's been a mentor to him, surfs at Rocklands. I paddle out at Rocklands, and the Holy Spirit says to me, you need to speak to that guy. And I'm like, nah, Rocklands is a hectic wave. I'm just trying to figure out how to get over this first 2 ledges, grab the rail, and get barreled without dying and getting washed up onto the rocks and into the wall. I mean, it's really an intense, very technical wave. But God's like, hey, remember the wilderness? I'm not asking you, mate. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So I paddle up to Ian, and I'm like, hey, I start having a conversation with him. He says, yeah, no, I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. And that starts this little community of band, music, surfing that becomes viral. It's so, just has a life of its own, an energy of its own. The band is driving the surfing, and the surfing is driving the band. When there's a big event, the band's playing. I remember gigs in houses where we would run these secret gigs, so people, the sort of fans of the band would kind of come. And the band wasn't part of the Christian music scene. We didn't know there was a Christian music scene. We were just making music, and we were listening to the very definitive, the people that were really defining the front end of music, the Nirvanas, the Smashing Pumpkins, Cranberries. We had a female vocal. And those people were like the front epicenter of what was happening in the music world. So our music was following on after that. That was our influence. And then while that was happening in the surf world, there was just these guys like pioneering the whole 90s thing was kicking off. So the Machados, the Kellys, and the Airs, and that was all happening in our surf scene with all of the crew. So it was just and then everyone was students. So people had no money and lots of time. And so there was this very palpable, amazing, like a wave that was just sweeping across the country, and it just had this energy to it.
Okay, mate, so this viral thing is fascinating to me, because you're doing this thing is exploding. You mentioned the term viral before things went viral. There's no social media, of course. So what is it that was driving this thing forward? Because it feels like it got big really quickly.
I wouldn't say it actually did get big. Well, it's all relative, right? So it was viral and contagious in that sense. It wasn't viral as in the modern sense of like what, with social media. And there was no social media. There was nothing. Actually, one of the greatest compliments I think we ever got was we were playing a gig at the Nelsy in Stellenbosch. And this guy, a student there, walked up to me and he said, Sunsurf is like Fight Club. You don't know you're in it unless you're in it, And I mean, Fight Club is such an iconic movie from the 90s. Yeah. And yet there was that same kind of viral thing of it growing. And this was an external person. This wasn't me, it was one of the insiders. They were going, this is an amazing thing that's spreading all around in these different universities and spaces. But it's so hard it's almost like, how do you know it's there, unless you know. And that certainly wasn't our strategy. It wasn't like, don't tell anyone about Sunsurf. So what I think was interesting about it was, I really think at the epicenter of this was a commitment to follow Jesus. And this was more like a groundswell that he had decided was going to hit our coastline. And the question was, and it's often come up in my life, God going, I'm going to do a new thing. Do you want to ride the wave, or do you want to sit on the beach? And there's so many times I think that God's like, I'm going to do something. You get a choice. You can get involved, you can get on the wave, and you can ride it. You can ride this swell, or you can sit on the sidelines and let it pass by. And so some of the things that were happening in that time was a deep commitment to community. So if I look back at it, there was a real sense of authentic community. A lot of school kids and varsity age folk with lots of time and no money. And then there was a high authenticity. So it was real deal. It wasn't like, if you wanted to come and join Christian surfers, we weren't going to surf like a beginner wave. It was like and there was a high sense of you're welcome. Like we didn't care if you didn't surf or what kind of craft you rode, which was also unusual at the time. We didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. We didn't care about the color of your skin or any of those things that were sort of happening in South Africa. It was just open and easy. And I think the music played a big part of that. So and the events. So we started running and organizing events, and there's pictures that of like an event that would take place at Tableview High School Hall. So we started in Sea Point, and we kind of then moved out, and we got the license to run Christian surfers, Sun Surf at the time, from the local lifesaving club in Bloberg. And me, Ian, and Dom, and a couple of the other guys were there. And then Dimitri was running something different in other places. And so we started working in schools. So we did anti-drug classes in schools. I remember going into schools and rolling joints, but with chocolate flaky inside, and then handing those joints out. And like the surf kids are like, this is the best anti-drug. The guy's giving me a joint in the middle of school. And I think those things got us into trouble with the sort of traditional church.
I can't imagine why.
And then we started, these events were just, there was bands that played at the events. They were all surf bands. So we'd have like 3,000 kids in Tableview High School Hall or whatever it was. The whole hall was packed. I don't know how many kids, maybe 3,000. Let's just say
lots.
We had a full hall of kids packed literally from front to the back, massive mosh pits in the front, and then events at the beach where the surf contests would happen. And then we had weekly meetings, and we just expanded those and did what needed. So we'd help kids with study. We'd whatever. We ended up being surf coaches in high schools, and
so it's a holistic approach to those young people that were finding Christ. It wasn't just hey, let me introduce you to Jesus and go for a surf. There was more going on than that.
Oh, for sure. So and it was we had kind of, the whole thing of life to the full was at the front end of it. So I remember someone coming to me and saying, I don't really want to come to Sun Surf. And I was like, why? So I'm struggling with drugs and dope addiction. So I was like, Barry, we'd rather have you here stoned than not have you here at all. Like, you're welcome. And you're welcome to be here and be part of it and belong. We're not giving you a list of things that you have to be able to belong and be part of it. We want you to know Jesus, but we don't convert people. That's the job of the Holy Spirit. God is the one who converts. What we do is take them surfing. What we do is say, look, if you open your eyes, Jesus is like, for a surfer, it's like the best day with your best mates in the best conditions. Like, there is so much depth that our Father, that Jesus wants to give us, but there's so much that has to be that of history in the church and things that sometimes need to be sort of demystified, right? The simplicity is the God of the universe came to earth, lived, died, rose again, and offers us life to the full. And in that life to the full, we find life to the full. And it doesn't mean life's perfect and easy. Life has its ups, its downs, its valleys, its deep, dark valleys. But we get to walk it with a good shepherd. And that was, I think, what was happening. So you had a whole lot of kids, and there were some incredible, crazy stories. The band at the same time was not playing there was a Christian band circuit, but they were playing the secular circuits. So, I'd be tuning my guitar, and the guy next to me taking the pips out of his dope, and we were playing with other bands, and we were trying to be salt and light, which works by contact and contrast, and that became viral and contagious. And so then we started local little chapters or missions, and they started spreading all over Cape Town. We would do trips up the coast, so we had school holidays. I remember doing one trip where we took this group of kids up the coast and piled them into 2 minivans, trailers, boards stacked to the hilt. Most of those kids had become Christians, but not from Christian homes, and they'd literally been believers in Jesus for like 2 weeks, maybe maximum 14 days.
Yeah.
So we'd come through J Bay, and then we'd head to East London, and we'd normally base ourselves there. And I get this story about Bible bashing. So I keep hearing all these kids talking about Bible bashing. I'm thinking, what on earth is Bible bashing? I've never heard of this. Remember, these guys have been Christians for less than 14 days. So anyway, I speak to this one guy, and let's call him Jake. And I'm like, hey, Jake, what is Bible bashing? And he goes, well, and then he looks at me. He goes, I don't know if we're doing it exactly right, but basically what we do is we go to our friends who don't know Jesus, as in like 2 weeks ago, I was in this position. And then we go out to the same parties we used to go out to, and we get them completely drunk to the point where they're crying. And then we smash their beer bottles and lead them to Jesus, take them to church on Sunday.
That's mental.
Yeah, but then he looks at me and he goes, in all innocence, this is a 16-year-old kid, and he goes, I don't know if that's right, but it's working.
It's working. I love it.
So I'm like, well, I love your passion. I think we
Wow.
can work on the methodology,
Yeah.
but so I think there was, and then those kids would.
It was messy because it
Oh, it
was
was
young
messy.
people
Yeah, it
just
was so
being
messy.
young people and working the thing out.
It was so messy, mate. We had a guest speaker that didn't arrive on one of our trips, and being a young surfer, I heard about this Bible bashing thing, so I paid for everyone on my trip, I had some extra money, so I paid for 2 van loads of kids to be able to go into an under 18 disco nightclub in East London to go and Bible bash.
Wow.
And literally I asked them, I had the latest video, so in a non-viral, non-digital world, to get the latest surf video was like gold. Like every surfer would come together around that. And we did that too. But I said, do you want to watch this or do you want to go Bible bashing? And every single one of those kids were like, let's go Bible bashing. And I was like, okay, here's the rules. Like, definitely no drinking. This is an under 18 club. And you got to actually do it. You're not gonna back off. This is like and they did. And it was chaos. And then I got home and I got into so much trouble from the church because they were like, you did what? So it was super messy.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that it was viral, it was real, it was reaching young people where it was at. It was being led by young people.
Yeah. And I don't think the church understood the culture at the time. I think we're in a different season now.
Yeah.
And it's one of the greatest opportunities that I think Christian surfers today has ahead of it, is that the recognition that a lot of those folk are now pastors, and so many people through the Saved Surf Club have become pastors, significantly influential pastors. And churches have become different and are much more welcoming and much more authentic and much more open to surfers. And so I think there's an opportunity there to say that perhaps didn't exist back when this was starting. When this was starting, there was really like a lot of pushback, both from the surf community and the church community.
How did you become the director of all of this? What was?
I don't know.
I mean, from that mountaintop experience to I'm giving up surfing, Lord, I'll take it, and then suddenly you're having to carry the weight and responsibility of leading this thing across South Africa. Is that something that the team kind of came up with, or was it?
I think there are a couple of really interesting moments in that space. Again, I think it evolved, and so basically what we identified was we hadn't managed to get Durban started, and I'd love you guys to get hold of Craig Yadan and Gordon Downs, because they were 2 young guys that were similar, a little bit. Now we're fast forwarding, several years, and they were the pioneers of Durban. And man, what they did there was just phenomenal. But how I ended up being the director was kind of strange. So what you got to remember, nothing like this existed, and this was all informal. It had no structure. It had no legal structure at all. It was just a thing that was happening. I just thought this is what I was going to do while I was studying, and then we were all going to move on, and somebody else would take over. And so, but it had grown so much by the end of my 3.5 years study, that we didn't know what to do with it. So I went to other organizations to see if it could fit with them, churches and like pre-existing organizations like script unions and other places. And we tried to fit in there. And in fact, I had to jump through all these hoops as the guy leading this to say, okay, I'll do this and this and this, because I need to bring this thing under, surely there's some kind of Christian organization that knows where we're going, that's got a roadmap that we can follow. And there was nothing. There was literally nothing like this. And so after all of that time, spending literally 12 months trying to fit this into another organization, I ended up coming to the end of my studies, about to graduate, and having a conversation with the CEO of this organization, and him saying to me, Roy, like, this just doesn't fit. Like, what we want you to do these things, and what you're wanting to do is these things. And it was at that very painful moment that the church that we were part of also went through a massive church split. It had nothing to do with us. We were just part of the casualties. And so we were kind of faced with a conundrum. What do we do? And we did something that, when I look back now, was insane. My mate, who had qualified as a chemical engineer and had a job as an engineer and doing well on his career path, Ian was finishing up his studies as a structural engineer. I'd finished up my studies. And myself and Dimitri were like, we are going to go full-time with this. We're going to figure out how to do this, and we're going to do it on our own. Wow. So we got kicked out of the church and went into the wilderness for a season, ended up in a guy named Dean Payne's bedroom where we were running Christian surfers with no money, like sleeping, like literally it was insane. I'm entrepreneurial, so I'd started figuring out how to do things, and we started running national series, or first was Cape Town series with a wetsuit company. So we had run their contest series for them throughout the year. They'd pay us the money, and that's how we'd survive and pay our rent. And we were literally on the breadline doing this. And it took a massive sacrifice for somebody like Dimitri to resign from his job and commit to doing this. And so in that moment, we were now becoming something, starting to get ourselves organized. And Dimitri was a massive part of that because his skill set was very different to mine. He was way more organized and way more structured. And yeah, it started becoming Sunsurf, and then Sunsurf became Christian Surfers, and it started having different. We started developing strategy around local chapters and missions, and I think scaled it to like at some point 25, 27 local chapters. We had these big events happening in different places in the country, and a very cool story called freestyle cakewalking, which I should tell you about.
So what in the world is freestyle cakewalking?
So remember I told you Durban took a bit longer to start, and so by this time we were engaged with Australia, so we were learning from them and others that had been doing this for longer than us, and in some ways their validation was what helped, that you can actually do this. It has been done in other countries. You might be the first in your country, but it has been done elsewhere. So freestyle cakewalking, we prayed for years to see something happen in Durban, and eventually these two young guys, Gordon Downs and Craig Jordan, we went to visit them, and they were like varsity students as well at the time, and went in bands and music, so it fitted well. They're really good surfers, and when we spoke to them, they were like, "Well, how do you start this? Like, what is your playbook? Give us a manual?" And we were like, "You pray." And they were like, "What do you mean?" So that's what's worked. You just pray, and then things start. So they were like, "Okay." Well, so they started doing that, and then they started all these fun things, Friday night frenzies outside McDonald's with like punk bands. We'd moved to punk now. Punk bands like rocking out, and just kids going crazy. Anyway, I get a phone call from Craig, and he's like, "Hey, we want you to come up to Durban. We've got this outreach event. There's the Mr. Price, the big Durban event's happening." And he goes, we'd love you to come up there, and we're going to do a freestyle cakewalk. So I'm like, "Craig, what is a freestyle cakewalk?" And he goes, "It's too hard to explain. Just come and see." So I rock up at Durban early in the morning. I walk down, and it's at the skate park further up on the Golden Strip, and there's all these kids just dropping in and skating, and Craig's around there. They're all walking in with these Tupperwares full of little cupcakes that their moms have baked. And then we get to the end of that little session, and Craig's like, "Okay, T-shirts," and he's handing out T-shirts, and the T-shirts go, Sunsurf, freestyle cakewalker, and then on the back it's got Jesus loves you, right? And I'm like, this is insane.
What is going on?
Yeah, full on. Like every kid's got a T-shirt, freestyle cakewalker, and I think Jesus loves you on the back. And so I'm like, okay. And then he calls the kids together. He says, "Okay, this is what we spoke about. You guys need to pray now. We're going to go and hand out our cupcakes." And I'm thinking, man, I've never seen anything like this. And so he goes, "What I want you to do," he asked this little Grom to pray. And the Grom says, the prayer I can still remember. This kid's T-shirt is like over his knees. And he's like, "Lord, help us to bust out and not wuss out." That's literally his prayer. And then we walk down into the middle of the crowd. The first guy that hand out these little muffins or cupcakes to is one of the DJs. He's one of the national DJs in a little caravan, and he's broadcasting around the country. And he's like, "I am not touching those cupcakes because I don't know what you guys have baked in there."
Yeah, of course.
And then at the same time, there's the contest area, which is obviously security, and there's these two massive big security guards, and that's like no one's allowed in there, obviously. And as these two little kids are walking past, there's this mom who's one of the officials running the event, and she sees these kids and goes, "Oh, so cute, freestyle cakewalkers." So she ushers them into the tower thinking that they want to share their cupcakes and meet their heroes. And so 5 or 6 kids walk past the two biggest, like, missing link Cro-Magnon man guards, ushered into and as they're walking past, Craig's there, he's going, "You asked for the opportunity, you've got the opportunity, this is your point to bust out." So the mom is letting these little kids in thinking they want to see the surfers and get autographs. And she's literally let in 10 or 5 of the most crazy evangelists with freestyle cakewalk, Jesus loves you. And they're literally walking around the tower going, handing out cupcakes and saying to people how much Jesus loves them.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, Lord, like, this is the thing. Like, God asks us to ride the waves. Sometimes things happen if we just let him do his thing that is way beyond what we could imagine. And it's not moments after that I'm sitting on the beach with the crew. We've handed out all the cupcakes. And I'm just, like, probably an hour or two later, and I'm just thinking, I just can't believe that happened. And the guy comes over the microphone, one of the commentators, and he says, hey, thanks to the Sun Surf crew. And he says to the entire beach, Jesus loves you more than you could know.
Wow.
Which is a quote from a song, right?
Oh.
But, yeah, just an amazing God moment, yeah.
The story is filled with these crazy moments of...
Oh, yeah, we broke into a nunnery, but that's a story for another day.
Wow. Well,
let's leave that one for another day.
Into a nunnery. Sounds fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Your story is filled with these major moments of breakthrough and God just turning up and showing off. What about the moments where it's been challenging? What about the moments where you felt like, well, maybe is God going to show, or something's gone wrong maybe, and mistakes have been made? What have been the pain points, the challenging moments?
I'm glad you asked that, because I think so often we think that things happen or God works outside of that and everything is easy. But often the high points, the freestyle cakewalk, those kind of things, but also the low points or the turning points that help shape something. And there have been some really dark and very difficult moments. And, there's... that I think have shaped the values and the culture of Christian surfers in South Africa.
What do you do with the scars of when things go wrong? Those things that, as you say, often we're celebrating the winning moments, but there's sacrifice, there's pain, there's betrayal, there's misalignment of people's expectations, there's politics often. All of these things are the natural overflow of humanity rubbing up against one another, conflict that takes place. And to think that it wasn't part of those founding days is to be naive.
Yeah.
It would have been part of that whole journey. How do you heal from those moments? Or do those moments scar you and they live with you forever?
No, because I think life to the full involves those moments. Life is not life to the full without the valley. And the valleys, we as humans love to tell stories about the mountaintops, but we shy away from stories around the valley. Yet the valley is where the learning happens. And so probably... So the other thing people love is about the story, the origins of Christian surfers, Sun Surf South Africa, is the viral nature of it. But to sustain something like that is very difficult. And then to put structure around something like that, because it's a movement, there are things happening. And a lot of those things are meant to just happen and fall away, like a bloom of flowers. But in this case, to get from the amazing moment when we were all students and we didn't have to work hard and things were just happening and God was moving and people were finding Jesus and getting saved and moving on, to actually an organization took a lot of grit and hard work. And probably one of the hardest moments was the back end of that when myself and Dimitri had stepped out. He had decided to move on and go and study in the US. And we were trying to run this thing with not enough financial means. There was no income. We had been running these contests and just literally scraping by. I was looking to get married. And, and there's so much of our story is Sharon, because when I did get married, we lived off her income as a teacher. She underwrote Christian surfers. And that was deeply painful. And especially as some of my mates who had gone, studied and then were now working, and I was so aware that I'm falling further and further behind. Like, I didn't have that first house, I didn't have that car, and I was living on nothing because I believed in this mission that I was trying to pioneer. But it was very difficult to fund the mission because who donates to something like that, and what kind of entrepreneurial thing can you do? What product can you make or service can you sell? It was really, really hard and got harder and harder. And actually remember, one of the key pain points was my wife turning around and saying, I hate this ministry. I hate this. And at that moment, I realized she didn't hate the ministry. She hated what it was doing to us, and it was crushing us. And then there was another moment, probably on the back of that, I was probably burning out a little bit, where basically someone came in from overseas, positioned themselves in a powerful way, had all the money and the resources, and there was a national conference. So we run this big national conference. It's actually the photo in the book. If you open the Groundswell book, which is the story of Christian surfers globally, there's a beautiful photo of South Africa, of all, probably about 50, 60 leaders from all over the country there. And one of the people in that space ends up, and friends of mine kind of manipulate the situation, and I'm fired. I run and organize that thing, living on no money, and drive to J-Bay, because it happened, the conference happened here, in a car with my beautiful young wife, and leave J-Bay fired from Christian surfers. The thing that I've helped found. Wow. The thinking is that I am burning out and they need to hand over leadership, but the leadership has been handed over to somebody who's living in moral failure, and he doesn't own up to the moral failure when he takes over the leadership. So you fast forward that story 2 years, and everything that we had is gone. It's burnt to nothing. God's just gone, taken his hands off it.
Wow.
And we have to start again. And that's one of the key moments. At this stage, I've started my own business, and I'm loving life. And signing contracts, flying to Joburg, doing things. I'm in my entrepreneurial zone. I love that. I've pulled the business together. I've got a partner who's a young surfer kid who understands the wild, wild world of web, which is basically just emerging. And I've got another business partner, another guy that has a software company, and his wife has a hardware company and supplies services. And I convince him that this is a new space. He's looking for something that's going to be in this new space to add to his quiver of business things. And I know nothing about any of this, but I asked that the three of us get together, and the three of us form a little company. And that little company sort of takes root, and I'm probably more on the sales marketing side. The young surfer guy is the guy who really understands the technology and what's going on, and the business partner gives us access to. He gives us 3 months, an office space, phone line, access to his clientele, and says, okay, if you guys can turn this around in 3 months, but I want 33% equity. So we're then sharing. It's a 33% split between the three partners, and we head off, and it's cracking. And it's in that moment that one of the craziest things of my life, and the guy preached on Sunday, preached about it. Because the same thing, I didn't realize it until last week Sunday. There's that moment where Elijah has just done whatever he's done with the king and all the weirdness. And then he runs away into the desert, and God comes to him and says, "What are you doing here?" So for me, this moment is I'm loving it. I mean, we've signing contracts, we've got plenty of work, things are happening, life simple, product, service, pay, day, done. And I mean, it's still a startup, it's still young, but it's just a different.
But it's going well. There's no drama.
There's drama and that, but it's a much easier lever. Like, I build you a website, you pay me money.
Yeah.
I go to a company in Johannesburg and we build a website for a big health company, which is one of the clients, and they pay us a lot of money. And I can see my trajectory. I know where I'm going. I've left Christian Surfers. I'm going to I want to move to consulting and to running an e-commerce site. So that was really my thing. It's like, this is the magic source space, the e-commerce bit. And these are all thoughts in the back of my head. I haven't shared this with many people, but in that moment, I get up randomly, go to the loo, and as I walk in the loo, when someone throws a punch and you flinch? I don't know what happened. I just fell on the floor, put my hands over my head and said, "Lord, what do you want?" And clear as day, it wasn't an audible voice, but it might have been. He just says, "What are you doing here?" And then there's a struggle that happens between me and Sharon, and a season where this moral failure comes out, and everything crashes.
From this guy.
Yeah.
Before.
And I offered to step back in to resurrect Sunsurf again for the second time. And when I do that, the board's actually like, "Wait a minute, we've messed up before. How do we know this is right?" So I step in, and then that's when, like, I'm keeping now a record of finances, and I realize we're going further and further into debt. And this is a really powerful moment. I think if you go through these valleys, but you go through it with the Good Shepherd, if you're following him, if you're doing what he asks you to do, even though there's high sacrifice, there are moments out of that are gold. And one of those moments is, now I'm part of another church. It's a beautiful church called Edge Church. So significant, so kingdom focused. It's so much part of my journey, Sharon's journey, is this church that is literally wide open, no surfers, but absolutely believes in the kingdom first. And I'm getting mentored, I'm getting discipled, I'm getting taught, I'm forming myself as a young adult now in this space. And in that space, Christians, that I'm learning to manage things better. Christian surfers, I've gone back into debt. And Sharon says to me, I hate this thing. And I have a record of the debt. So I can actually prove what I've spent money on. This trip to this people, these things for this for that, this for that. All of these personal expenses that I've carried. And we have this iconic meeting with we've set up a governing body now, a governing structure. And in that governing meeting, there's a massive sense of repentance. We are so sorry, Roy, that this has happened to you again. And we recognize that we need to step up. We need to change things, but we don't know how. There is no money, so we don't know what to do. And there's this beautiful God moment. And in this God moment, people sitting in Ian's room, living room, praying and weeping. And they want me to call Sharon because they want Sharon to come in. They're actually apologizing to us. And almost the recognition where the movement, Christian Surfers, is recognizing we actually now have to grow up. We're all growing up together. Yeah. So we're all students. We're all now in a different space. We don't know how we're going to get the income right. We don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to do things the God way. And while that happens, the phone rings downstairs. It's the group of elders from Edge Church that have met. And I have a figure. It's a significant figure. And random conversation. I'm like, get called out of this meeting to go to a phone call that I have to go to. I'm thinking, why can't they just wait until I'm there on next week Sunday? And they say, how much debt are you in? So I give them the figure. They say it's gone. So I mean, what do you mean it's gone? They say, we're going to cover it. I walk back into the meeting where people are crying and weeping. And I go, guys, it's done. They say, what's done? I said, the debt's gone. They said, what are you talking about? I said, it's gone. And the fact that those two meetings and that thing happens, there's no way else. No one can script that. That has to be God. So in that little moment, there's God's endorsement, yes, I'm behind this. But we are starting again. We've got nothing left, and we're literally starting from scratch again. And that's the next part of the journey of Christian Surfers, to a team, to establishing, to strategy, to systems, to donations, to structure, to changing its name, becoming part of the international team, part of Christian Surfers International, to moving to J-Bay, starting Sea Salt, which now exists in other locations, and me working with the international team and growing as leader.
It's incredible to hear the mountaintops, the valleys, God's faithfulness through it all. As there may be young leaders watching this today, and thinking about what they could do. What is it that they would just go and do, make something happen? What advice would you give them as they step out into their journey of serving God and reaching surfers?
Number one, above everything else, without any shadow of a doubt, know that He is the center of gravity. Because when the difficultness comes in a leader's life, you will always, and you will face, and I've faced crises of belief, where are you, God? What's happening? Are you still in my world? This is insane. This shouldn't be happening to me. How did I lose the business? How did I lose that child? How did this happen? At that moment, Him being the center of gravity is where you're going to go back to. And it's at that moment that His assurance of you need to carry on is what's going to count. He may also say to you, stop. Because there are others in the ministry that God was like, it's time for you to move on. One of my best mates, Ian Coleman, he wanted to join us, and God was clearly, I'm calling you to a different path. And it was his journey of pain in letting go of this desire to run part of a surf ministry and walk into the world of business is a beautiful story. To see the impact and power that he's having in that space now as a Christian is phenomenal for me. And it's part of God's writing the story. So to any young leader, this is not our gig. This is the decision. The decision at 16 to hand my life over to Jesus and say, I'm making you the center of gravity, means that I'm handing him the pen. And I've preached on this, but there's a scripture in Psalm 139 that says, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Yeah. And then there's another scripture in Hebrews where it says, Jesus is the author and finisher of your faith. And we think those are the same, but they're different. Psalm 139 is God's view outside of time, looking back at our life as a movie. He knows exactly what's going to happen. This day is going to be great. This is going to be one of the hardest days of your life. But he's not involved. He's looking in on that. There's a big difference between God knowing and looking in on your life, to giving God the pen and saying, you write the story. And to any young leader, I would say, allow God to write the story, because he will always write a more amazing story than you'll know. And it will go through the mountains, and it will go through the valleys. All of life has that. We all have that. And yet it's in those places, in that crisis of belief, when I'm like, God, are you there? Because that time on the mountain when I gave away surfing, I was also struggling with my faith. I was like, God, you've abandoned me. You've left me. So maybe I need to leave you. So in those deepest, darkest moments when I'm about to walk away from God, he goes, will you low down surfing? I say yes. And there's a period of 3 weeks. It doesn't just change. There's this healing and these moments. But it's that one thing above everything else that will set your life in the life to the full. The life to the full cannot be lived without the shepherd.
It's brilliant. Well, it's been incredible to hang out with Mr. Harley. What a legend of faith, a legend in the whole Christian surfer's story. What a great thing to end on. Give God the pen, let him write this incredible adventure story in your life. Get out there and do something.
Woo! Get out there and just do something with him. I think that's the thing, right?
That's the thing,
right? And I think that's some of the stuff. I know that we've wrapped this, but
it was a wrap.
This is what.
Hang on, we're going back in.
You touched on something. I think people look back. What worries me is that people look back at the origins of Christian surfers and try and duplicate that. But God is not there. And the other thing I'd say to young people is God is just waiting for somebody to live life to the full. He's just waiting for somebody to say, put up my hand. I mean, God is like that crazy friend of yours that always pushes you to the edge. Like it's always scary, but in a good way. As Narnia, the guy C.S. Lewis says, he's not a tame lion. He's a lion, but he's not tame. But he's loving and kind. And I think this, if I look at maybe young people that are watching this, my thing is, what is God calling you to do? What is unique and new inside Christian surfers or in some other space? Like what other young maverick right now, young guy or girl, is God putting his hand on who's starting their story? Because he does generation after generation after generation. So there's a generation of young people that are not going to recreate what happened in the past. God never recreates. He always creates brand new. So I'm excited to see what he will do next.
An exciting new chapter ahead.
Absolutely. And what's it? Find out where God's working and get involved with that.
Yeah, it's good advice. Well, Roy, thanks for giving us the time, and to Sharon as well, and for your whole family pioneering Christian Surfers South Africa and now leading Christian Surfers International around the world. It's an amazing job that you do, and we're very thankful. What a great time we've had. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you in the next one.
Yoo-hoo.